James, you're in Ohio, is that right?
Yeah. Just a small farm town outside of Dayton,
Uh-huh.
Ohio. Right. It's called Brookville, Ohio, is where we're at. And
How long you been there?
we moved here in 2016. Before that, we lived in a town over. Just it's called New Lebanon. Just a
Mhm.
few miles down the road, not very far at all. It's small farm towns. They're 5 minutes this way, 5 minutes that way. It
Yeah,
doesn't.
I've been through Ohio. I think one time it was, if I remember, really cold when I was going through.
It's really cold right now. It's about 40 degrees out, so
Yeah.
not missing much here.
Well, I talked to your sister a couple days ago. She's a real firecracker. I uh,
That's
I,
one way to put her.
I enjoyed her a lot. Um, Bring me up to speed about you. You got a family, I
Yeah.
understand.
So long story short, I'm completely remarried to my wife Sharon. She had two kids, Penny and Parker. They were older than my son from my previous married, who I
Mhm.
had Caleb. And then once we got married, we decided let's do this again, and we had one together, and we have Luke. So we have a total of four
Wow.
total kids, from 19 all the way down to 8.
Oh,
Um,
very
yeah,
nice.
one of
Very
them's
nice.
out on her own, and she's not far. She's just down the road, and then
Mhm.
the other boys are here.
Very nice. Well, James, what I like to do is I like to ask three questions.
Okay.
Number one, can you tell me what your life was like before you found the gospel?
Oh man, life before the gospel. It was a array of things. I was before I found the gospel. I was in a dark place, I'd say. I was pretty dark. I just recently got medically retired from the Marine Corps. Went through a divorce, and then so my life was completely dark to me in those time frames. Fighting for custody of my son, of shared custody and whatnot. And I mean, I was an alcoholic, believe it or not. I was never diagnosed with it. Never went to meetings or anything else like that. I mean, I was
Right.
start at the bar and end at the bar and shut it down. I was a
Wow.
case and probably a half a bottle of something a day. And then,
Wow.
behold, some things happened in my life and I was like, I can't do this anymore. And then, long story short, about how me and Sharon met, and then she came into my life a little bit long later down the road, where I wasn't really drinking this heavy anymore. I was only a
Mhm.
couple here and there, and then she entered into my life again. I,
Awesome. So you knew her before? Is that what you're
so
saying?
So our story is kind of unique. I met her. She was working at a bank as the bank manager, and I played softball with a coworker of hers. And I was like, Jesse, every time I walked in there, me and Sharon would flirt with each other, and his name was Jesse. And I was trying to get her a number. He finally gave it to me, and then she pretended through text messages like she had no idea who I was. So I was like, well, I crashed and burned on this one.
Yeah.
So late 6 months or so later down the road, I ended up getting a text message from her, and randomly after she's already moved, transferred banks, no longer in the same town or anything like that. And then it was her, and then we went out on a date, and it was history from there.
Is she the one who brought you to the gospel? How do
Uh,
you how did you find the gospel?
so through her and her family, her entire family is all members of the church.
Mhm.
So my first introduction, golly, I want to say it was I would say the first kind of month we were kind of dating. She was doing a family camping trip out at the family farm where the whole family goes to with all her cousins. Her and her cousins were all single at the same time, and then they ended up all getting boyfriends, engaged, and married almost within a year. And so it was kind of unique. And so they were already all had these other guys in their lives who were all
Right.
most of them were prior missionaries and such. And so I come into the family where everybody's a lifelong member essentially, and here I am as a black outcast.
Right. Right. So
It's
did you see something in them that spoke to
yeah,
you spiritually?
yeah. So spiritually wise, I've had lots of great conversations with Trevor Blumel. He's pretty much kind of like my brother-in-law. Sir,
Uh-huh.
my wife's cousin's husband, but the family atmosphere and how togetherness and closeness, and that's what really drew me in. Is like seeing that and seeing what and how and being around and how at this point my life is starting to turn around almost in a full 180, 360, whatever you want to say, where I'm going from bar hopping, getting drunk every single day, now to being more family orientated, doing things together with the family and being a part of something where I could see my life stepping forward on things.
Very nice. It sounds like they all just accepted you right in, like you were just one of the crowd. Come on in, love everywhere, and friendship, a whole new culture.
There was, because I had a different outlook, and one of her cousins even said, "Is James sleeping in the same tent with Sharon?" Like, he's even worried on that. But yeah, it was definitely open arms, open welcome right in, no hesitation, truly. And me and Trevor and Matt, we're the closest, and we all got along phenomenally. And that's who we're the closest with in the family as well. And looking up to them, and then obviously Sharon's dad played a huge factor too, in learning from him. And actually, Sharon's dad is the one who baptized me.
At some point, did they bring the missionaries in, or they were all returned missionaries, so they could all talk intelligently?
I was learning about the church kind of through them. At this point, I haven't gone to church with Sharon or anything else like that, and so we were around the family all this time, and then she was like, we got engaged, and then she was like, well, before I marry you, you have to come to church. And I was like, okay. She's like, you have to see what my life is all about. And I'm like, all right, well, I think I kind of already know this, but she's like, I want you to come to church. And I went to church, and I just felt this feeling that last time I felt that feeling was when I was a child, and I went to a Bible camp down in Monticello, Kentucky, for a Baptist church. And I remember feeling the Spirit, and obviously I know that was the Spirit, like kind of then. And that was kind of the first real religious thing I ever did when I was younger. And then having that same feeling the second I walked into the church. And then we had a couple elders there. And then right afterwards, I was like, I think it's time for me to meet the missionaries. Yeah. And it was next to nothing at that point.
Cool. Yeah. Now, this is a personal question. You don't have to ask or answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Did you ever feel like if you said no to the gospel, you're saying no to Sharon?
I did a little bit. I did. I don't think that it would have been a complete deal breaker, because at that point, I wasn't drinking anymore or anything else like that, but we built something together, and I wanted that in my life, and I wanted it to grow continuously. And then when I felt close, and then I started reading the scripture and I dove right in, I was like, this is what I've been missing most of my life, and throughout the Marine Corps, and having my best friend from the Marine Corps being a predominantly Catholic person, we get along great with religion, and seeing that in his life, and conversations that we've had, and then other guys that I served with in the military was always very religious. And so it wasn't like it was ever it wasn't absent from my life, but it was definitely not a part of my life, if that makes sense.
Gotcha.
And if I would have said no to it, I don't know where our relationship would have been, because I know that to her, it was key also to have that strong foundation in the gospel and to be able to raise our kids in it as well.
Yeah. Well, speaking of your kids, you brought kids into the situation that were already had their own culture and their own life. Did they accept it? Or are they interested in it?
Caleb was the only one that I brought into it with me. Obviously, he's actually a baptized member now. It took a little bit for his mom to fully understand on what being a Mormon is, and there's such negatory and such a derogatory term in culture, and to really realize, wait a second, no, we're not crazy, we're not doing anything unethical or anything like that, but it's really foundation of Christ that we can fill in for everything. And then he was baptized. He was a little older. I think he was 10, if I'm not mistaken. But when he got baptized finally, and then obviously Luke was born and raised in the church, and then that's our youngest. We just baptized him and Adriana, Jess's daughter, together this last May. So
nice. It sounds like to me that your kids have a culture now of Latter-day Saints around them. Like, do they cousins and friends and stuff?
Yeah, absolutely, cousins and friends. So speaking of friends, my stepson Parker, he has a girlfriend, and he, long story short, we had no idea that her and her mom and everything before they moved to Ohio were actually members or anything like that. came randomly throughout a picture, and Parker came running downstairs and saw that, hey, I think this is a church building. And of course, the church carpet walls, and they knew right away. And then we kind of figured it all out and put 2 and 2 together. So absolutely, it's kind of all around us. But I think it's good and bad. I think that it's great to be in the world and be able to realize that, especially like in our community here in Brookville, Ohio, it's very Christian atmosphere. Tons of kids are meeting before school and after school and doing church events and praying. And you see that, in the schools now. And I know it's been a long time, and it's probably very rare. Maybe in Texas is not for you down there, but in much other communities, you don't see that a lot, where groups of kids that actually are going to church and they know they all go to church can just talk about it openly and freely.
Yeah.
And I truly like, and it doesn't really matter which religion they are, because at the end of the day, if they're coming closer to Christ, that's all that's a win for everybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That, it's cliche, but that's the generation. That's our future.
Yeah.
So we need them to be involved in the gospel. Yeah. And I'm down here in the Bible Belt, so I see that all the time. Is there something that you think was monumental that changed in your life when you went from being a Gentile to being a saint? How is your life different now that you found the gospel?
My life was completely upside down. I lost super close family, friends that I grew up with. There's a couple guys that, I grew up with. One of them I even met while I was in the Marine Corps, found out he was from here. And, they were even supposed to be part of my wedding party. Like, one of them was supposed to be my best man. But because I chose this path, they weren't there. They weren't.
Right.
I mean, me and this guy, we spent our entire childhood together, even along with my sister. He went in the Army, I went in the Marine Corps. We still stayed. He was my brother. And my life flipped upside down. They're no longer around. They've never even met my son, Luke. And so that, to me, was the most monumental thing, is losing the people that I thought was my family, but I gained a whole nother family. And I became close with my sister again. Obviously, being able to baptize her and her daughter, and she moved in with us for a time being. That is what's, to me, it's about that eternity building. And I'm never looking back. I'm not going that way. I'm looking forward. And how can I move my family that way too? How can I continue to inspire them to say, hey, this is the path we're on. This is where we need to go.
Part of the interview with your sister Jessica, which was a few days ago, which is on the website now, I was really moved when she was talking about her life and the love that you showed her and the kindness that you and Sharon showed her, that I don't think she even realized that you were doing by sending the missionaries to her over and over and over again. It was
on that point, I just knew. I was like, if my life can be completely flipped upside down, and I can go from being angry, being an alcoholic, being depressed, being all these things, A, B, C through Z, what's it going to do for you too? Because she was right there drinking. She was right there next to me. There was no, and I've turned, and she saw that, and we continued to talk about it. I know that she talked about it a little bit on her and how my life changed, and she could see it. And then it's not just that we were sending missionaries. It wasn't just us. It was Jen and Trevor, my wife's cousins. It was the rest of Sharon's family that also took my sister in as well and made her part of the family. Like, when she comes back here from Utah, she's going to be a part of the Christmas Eve family tradition that Sharon's family has, and we'll be doing it right there at the church and doing this giant party where I think there's close to 60 people that will show up to this thing now.
Wow.
A huge undertaking. That's something that we didn't really have in our lives for most of it. We had it very, very small amount when we were very young, and then our family separated, and then we never had it again. And now we have this family, and it's amazing.
It sounds amazing. I want to move to Ohio and be part of your family. It sounds like a blast.
Her family's half our wards, so
yeah. Now, is there anything else that I didn't touch on or that we didn't say that you feel like you need to say?
No, I think you really. I also like I talked about the elders earlier, and there was I had two really, really good elders. I
Mhm.
know that probably most of my conversion story was probably because of my wife and the family that I'm joining, but I had two elders that were phenomenal, phenomenal young men that knew their stuff, knew how to react with me. One of them I still talk to this day, and everything. He lives out in Utah somewhere, but he was a really great kid, and I should call him a kid because they all are at that age. They're 18. They're kids, but they were really good. And obviously, you're coming in and dealing with somebody who's been in the Marine Corps for the last 10 years of his life, going through, just got done with a nasty divorce, an alcoholic, and that's some life that's getting thrown right into your face at 18.
Right.
Oh, that's huge. And so for them to be able to sit back and take all that in and deal with my craziness and nonsense, that's a big stepping stone on these young men. And I think it's wholeheartedly across the board even today, because I'm not the only one. There's a million stories out there just like mine, and probably way worse than mine, that they're helping and that we're helping throughout. And I can't wait for my boys to go out and be able to be a part of that.
That's exciting. That's exciting to think about having this tradition of yours, this Latter-day Saint love of Christ carry on through you. What the elders did for you and what Sharon's family did for you carry on through your boys, and they're going to go out in the world and be those same wonderful young men. That's great. Hey, thank you for your service to our country. I've been wanting to say that through the whole thing. I appreciate that greatly. And I'm really pleased, James, to have you as a brother, and thank you for coming on.
I thank you for the opportunity. It's the gospel has been a blessing in my life, and let me throw that. I mean, we've done so much church historical sites. I mean, we've gone out to Nauvoo. That was, it's funny is we talked about it, and it wasn't like the most fancy vacation that we've done, but it's one of the most memorable vacations that we have as a family. And over Gulf Shores, Alabama, going down there, going to the beach, going, or all these places. But I'm like, Nauvoo, still to this day, right now, for all of us, we would all go back there in a heartbeat. It was a blast. It was the time of my life. We got to see, I think it was the last year or the year before Hilcamore, the pageant that they were done with. We went there. That was an amazing time as well. And then being in Nauvoo and seeing it and experiencing it, obviously our next trip's going to be in Missouri, and then we plan on continuing it. And that's what I find the most unique is the history of the church and all these events that happen that someone like me would have never known.
Amazing. And it happened right here. You're in Ohio, so it happened right there.
Here, I mean, you talk about the prophet earlier, and like Joseph Smith getting tarred and feathered and dragged out and all these things. And I had a great conversation. I just got back for a trip across country to say goodbye to one of our brothers from the Marine Corps with my best friend from over in Indiana who I served with. And we were talking almost an entire day about these types of moments of the history of the church and how it came out. And he's obviously a devout Catholic, but he's interested in like learning. He's like wanting to know. And so it's just wild to see it, because without it, like I would have never known. My first experience, I remember the first temple I see. I now know it's the San Diego temple.
Yeah.
But I thought it was a giant Catholic church. Driving by it all the time in Southern California, I was like, oh, it's another church. I never even knew it. And I was like, man, well, I can't wait to go back one day to Southern California and actually go to that temple. I can't wait for that time.
Beautiful temple. I lived in San Diego for a while. Yeah. I love that temple. It's fabulous. All right. Well, brother, thank you so much for coming on, and God bless you and your family.
I appreciate the time. Thanks again.